Hi everyone, Drew with Drew Talks. Today we are going to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement. So before we begin, I want to make something really clear. The phrase Black Lives Matter, I agree with 100%. I don't add a but to the end of it or another phrase to it. Black Lives Matter, the phrase, I agree with. But in this video, we're going to be talking about Black Lives Matter, the activist group. They've named the organization Black Lives Matter. It's actually pretty catchy. And I want to talk to you about the activist group. Before we begin, let's talk about George Floyd. When he was murdered, I think it made everyone in America sick to their stomachs. I honestly couldn't watch the whole video. It was brutal, and it broke our hearts. And there was a pause afterwards where everybody was just in shock and wondering what we're gonna do. So Black Lives Matter shows up on the scene and start to do some activist activities. And I was hopeful at the time that we were gonna see some very, very needed change and reform in the criminal justice system. I have a list about as long as my arm of reforms I would like to see happen and that I've been speaking about before now, but I was hopeful that maybe people would start debating and discussing and actually give some of these reforms a chance. I'm going to list them. I'm not going to explain my reasoning behind them because that would be a whole other video. I would like to end no-knock raids. I would like to end police immunity. I would like to end policing for profit. I would like to end having prisons that are set up for profit in the private sector. I'm normally very, very for private sector, but with the prisons, I do not like them in the private sector. I would like to end prohibition 100%. And I would like to end mandatory minimums. Those are reforms that I think would help. Those are laws we could change that would maybe get our prison populations down and get it so our law system isn't so congested with many, many petty crimes. So that was one thing I hoped that they would be addressing. But instead, we started to see a lot of signs for abolishing the police. Now, I know a lot of people who are pro-abolishing police. I know many people who aren't. It's not the route I would go. I have lived in ghettos, and I can definitely say your neighbors are not going to help you in a lot of some of these places. You have to be able to call the cops if you're in danger. If we had private police, I'm concerned that the rich would have police, and if we had to pay for law services, the poor would be on the outside, and you would get little criminal kingpins running neighborhoods. Not to say that doesn't happen in the drug war right now, but again, I think that has to do with laws, less to do with policing. So I am not for disbanding the police. So when I saw that that was their main objective in the protests, I was kind of intrigued. It's not the route I would have gone. And I was just kind of wondering, well, what does the activist group Black Lives Matter stand for? Are they simply anti-police brutality? That's what a lot of people say they are. So I got on their website, and they are not just police brutality. A lot of it had to do with building up the Black community, rights for the African American community. But the thing that jumped out at me, that gave me incredible pause, was they reject the idea of a nuclear family, and therefore dismantling that idea, disbanding it. They do not believe that the nuclear family is necessary for a community to thrive. That goes against a lot of my core beliefs, and it also goes against a lot of statistics for what is needed for a strong community. A lot of statistics will show us that children do better in nuclear families when their father is present. I had a psychologist tell me that if you line up kids, the child who has two parents, regardless of their parents' income level or ethnicity, has a better chance of making it than their peers who are from a single mom household, regardless of how rich they are or their ethnicity, which I thought was very, very fascinating. It matters. And I know we like to say it doesn't matter because there are so many single moms out there that are doing a great job, and it is not their fault that, you know, some jerk does not want to fulfill his duty and take care of his kids. So I think, to be fair to them, sometimes we don't like to talk about this. But sometimes the truth just needs to be said. Statistically, it is better for children to have their mom and their dad, to keep the family unit together. Now, that helps communities. So I found myself somewhat at odds with the BLM mission statement. But I saw online that a lot of pastors were endorsing this. They were doing hashtag Black Lives Matter, which we all know the activist group has taken that phrase. That is their title. They were doing hashtag BLM and going out in support of this group, this activist group. So I was a little confused because just some of those core values I couldn't align with. And so I was like, you know what? There are a lot of pastors endorsing this. And as a Christian, when we don't know if something is of God, we just have to wait and see. So sometimes the best way to discern if something is of good or is of evil is to just watch and see what kind of fruit it produces. So I decided to take a few weeks and watch the fruit, see what it produced. Just to answer my questions is this something I should jump on board with? So what have been the fruits of the BLM protests? Well, I don't like that Antifa has shown up at their protests and they seem to be welcome there. Right from the beginning. I know people don't believe Antifa exists. It does exist. It has been around for a while. I'm not saying it has a ton of members, but some of the tags being thrown up on these buildings, some of the graffiti, you would see ACAB. That is an Antifa tag. It stands for All Cops Are Bastards. Those guys just like to start fights. And they're marching right with BLM. Now, when I first was watching these protests, there were a lot of leaders in the community that were doing a good job and were trying to keep the crowds in line, trying to maintain peace. But overwhelmingly, they were getting drowned out by a mob of anger. I would watch people up on the front line against the cops screaming profanities in their faces, spitting on them, screaming racial slurs at black cops. I am not a huge back the blue person because I don't like collectivism. I don't like to get behind a group and say, I back this group 100%. Because if there's corruption, I don't back it 100%. But I also don't believe in throwing people in the uniform into one category and saying, well, they're all bad. Because I know they're not. There's a lot of good police officers and there's some bad police officers. So I think the collectivism on both sides is bad. But that behavior was just totally awful and unwarranted. It was violence. And then we saw they made an autonomous zone in Seattle and they called it a festival. But what was happening down there didn't seem very festive. It was unlike any festival I've been to. The night they set that up, there was a little reporter out there reporting on what was happening. And they surrounded her, they harassed her, they terrorized her. They followed her and her camera crew for blocks, just verbally assaulting her, pushing her a little bit, scaring her. And the more shaky and the more teary-eyed she became and the more afraid she became, the more excited they became and the more zealous they became in their meanness. And in fact, one of the little kids who was doing this to her while they were recording it, he pulled down his mask and says to the camera, "Oh, hi, Grandma." Like he's proud of what he's doing. And if I were his grandma, I would be so upset. I would probably march down there and grab him by the ear and bring him home. No, that is not okay. A preacher went down to Chaz and was trying to speak to them about Jesus. I don't know what he was saying, but they did not allow freedom of speech down there. They put him in a headlock, they wrestled him to the ground, they robbed him, they threw him out. I heard one report that somebody lured a deaf girl into a tent down there and raped her. And you want to say that violence isn't real, but they finally had to shut it down because they killed a child. A 16-year-old boy was killed and a 14-year-old was shot. These are children. Rioting, looting, burning, violence, assault, dragging people out of vehicles, beating the tar out of them, and on film all you can hear is the crowd screaming, "Kill him, kill him, kill him." And one of the bizarrest things about this whole fiasco is people in the academic world are endorsing this. No matter what the mob does, they endorse it. The mob burnt a deer statue. It's like a statue of an elk or something in Oregon. Burnt it to the ground, destroyed it. And I kid you not, a few days later, some academic, well-educated person online wrote a blog or a news article or something explaining to the rest of us exactly why this was actually an important statement that the group was making on their quest for racial equality. Yeah, I didn't even read the whole article because I was afraid that that level of stupidity might be contagious. I'm sorry, it's a racial deer. Sorry, in the midst of all this drama, it's like, can you not hear yourself? You are actually arguing for the desecration of a deer statue. It's like the only funny thing that has happened in this whole thing. Because I guess what is weird to me is the academic world just like, wow, this is so powerful, so important. I totally stand behind this. I raise my fist. I endorse this. And I'm like, why? Why do they endorse something that is so blatantly awful and they have to explain to us all why it's awful? It's almost like, you know, we've all had a toxic person in our lives. And I've discovered that every single toxic person has like a whole herd of people around them. Normally it's family members who come around behind them and explain for them and make excuses. Oh, well, what you have to understand about Larry's childhood is yada, yada, yada. Or, well, Eleanor, you know, I know she said that, but here's what she actually meant. All these people coming around behind these toxic people saying, oh, this is actually what happened. You're misinformed. What you saw it wrong. And I feel like there's an entire herd of academic people coming around behind this mob, no matter what the mob does, and endorsing it with these arguments that sound so plausible. It's like, oh yeah, now I understand. It was a racist elk. No. And I think we're seeing this level of loyalty because I have heard a lot of bloggers, podcast people, and independent media say, this feels like a religion. The raising of the hands, the chanting back whatever the leader says, the demand for 100% conformity to their doctrine, the belief in original sin, you know, white fragility, original sin, it's there. and the demand for public confessions, it feels like a religion. Now, I may not have a God, but that is why people are so fanatically clinging to this. And they will not stand for anybody who deviates from the mantra that BLM is chanting at them. That's why they're not having discussions on the streets. They're just screaming the same phrases over and over and over again. So my breaking point for this, I've been watching this, I've been taking it in, I've been seeing things that I thought were maybe a positive direction, then I'd see these negative things. I've been horrified by some of these videos because I've been examining this and paying attention because it is important. We've got to be paying attention. My breaking point was the other day I woke up and I read that they had shot some little girl in Atlanta who was riding in her car. A little baby girl, 8 years old. They shot her. And everyone who supports the Black Lives Matters movement, at least in the media, they kind of acted like that was acceptable collateral damage, all for the cause. If I were leading a movement that ended up gunning down children, I would pull the plug. What the heck? And then that same day, I saw a video where Black Lives Matter showed up at a Southern Baptist church in New York. They had to bring in security to protect people going to this church. This is a multiracial church, and it didn't matter because it wasn't about unity. They were screaming profanities, yelling, "This is what democracy looks like." Some mom brought her kids in and they said they were going to call CPS on her. These are bullies. Stormed into a church. They have called for the desecration of the Catholic saints. I'm not Catholic. Believe them alone. They've come out and said, one of their leaders came out and said that Israel, just condemned the whole nation of Israel. Now, I think you can agree with a nation's policies, but to condemn a whole nation, like all the people, sounds kind of racially charged. And pastors are endorsing this group. This group that rages into restaurants, chants for a long time, there's a video of them chanting, and then at the end they require everyone to raise their hands, raise their fist up to their cause. I am not raising my fist to the BLM cause because I worship Jesus. I am not raising my hand to whatever it is that they want me to adhere to. You can support, I'm saying this to my friends here, people, you can support racial equality and absolutely condemn BLM for what they are doing. Again, you can support racial equality and not raise your fist to BLM. Pastors, you can support racial equality and not have to hashtag BLM. In fact, you want to end racism? Take people to Jesus. Because Jesus has said he doesn't care if you're a man or woman. He doesn't care if you're rich or poor. He doesn't care about your race. Because at the end of it all, when we get up to heaven, every tribe and language, nationality, people group, all of them are going to be represented up there. Because he made them all. So, I'm sure I'm not high profile enough to cause a whole lot of ripples, but I'm sure there are some people who are going to say some nasty things and accuse me of ridiculous stuff because I won't adhere to this new religion. But, you know, this is something a lot of us have been thinking, and a lot of us have been too afraid to say anything. But I'm not afraid. So I'm just going to stand up and say the emperor has no clothes on. This group They want to end the police. I think 10 African American men were killed by the police last year. So when they chant, while you're dining, thousands are dying, it would probably be better if they chanted, while you are dining, thousands are being incarcerated. But you know, what can I say? Facts matter to me. Apparently they don't matter to this new code. And I'm sorry, I support the Black community, and that's why I am not for abolishing the family unit. Barack Obama said one of the biggest issues facing the Black community is the lack of fathers. And he is right. So that is what I have to say. You know, I'm for unity, I'm for peace. I do not support BLM. And they can come after me with whatever cancel culture they want. That's fine. But I have to speak the truth. So there you have it. That's my opinion. It's a long one, but this is a heavy topic and we need to pay attention to it. So you can like this video, dislike it, comment, share it, report it if it goes against, you know, the core of what you are raising your hands to. And that's all I gotta say. Thank you guys.